So moving on then to the next essay in Derrida's Margins of Philosophy that I want to talk about. It's also a 1968 essay that's called The Pit and the Pyramid, an Introduction to Hegel's Semiology. And as forbidding and intimidating as the title sounds, it actually isn't all that bad once you get into the essay and read it. It's a long essay, but what it is part of, it's a concrete demonstration of Derrida's attack on the logocentric tradition, which has been a phonocentric tradition. It's a tradition that privileges speech over writing and aligns the voice with speech against writing, privileges time over space, since sound and the voice flow through time, and it also privileges nature over culture. In Rousseau's theory, the noble savage is more privileged, and writing comes along and along with culture as a supplement that corrupts the natural man, and so forth and so on. So we get these pairs of metaphysical opposites in the metaphysical tradition, in which one of the two is always privileged over the other. And so what Derrida wants to do is to go back and look at how Hegel situates his own theory of signs, that is to say, semiology. Semiology is something that was invented more or less by Saussure as the science of the study of signs and signifiers and how they work. And so he goes back and he looks at Hegel's texts, and there he finds that Hegel's theory of the sign is situated specifically within the philosophy of the spirit, and specifically that domain of it which has to do with psychology. And he says this is significant because it associates the signifier and the tradition of the sign, rather, with the living voice, the living breath, and therefore with the metaphysics of presence. The metaphysics of presence that is precisely what he's trying to deconstruct here. And so in doing that, what he says is that the pit in the title is actually Hegel's image of how the imagination works. So he says that Hegel has a theory that signifiers are produced by the imagination in the following way. Images are apprehended and they are withheld and into the memory, and they're interiorized into the cavern of the psyche, as it were, where they then exert, over time, they exert the power of a productive imagination to produce signifiers, so that the pit actually refers to the interior depths of the psyche and its capacity to produce signs, basically, to produce signifiers. And for Hegel, Saussure's theory of the sign is that the signifier is the acoustic image that refers to the signified, which is the concept, and that the relation between the two is arbitrary. For Hegel, he doesn't use this language, but he says that the sign is something that is a representation, the concept part of it, the signified, is a Vorstellung, a representation, and it's the psyche's ability to produce through imagination these representations that constitutes, for Derrida, the pit aspect of his pair of the pit and the pyramid. But the signifier aspect of it, the acoustic image of it, becomes, in Hegel's terminology, simply an external or exterior intuition, the actual physical thing that is in space, that is produced before the sight, which the physical eye sees. And these are for example, words on a page. These are the signifiers. And so what Hegel then does then is he goes on and he associates the signifier, the actual physical word itself, the written word, with the image of the Egyptian pyramid. And he uses the image of the Egyptian pyramid because the pyramid is a funerary monument inside which there is a dead body, and we have a monument to silence, as it were. And the word is the signifier is associated for Hegel then with the body. It's analogous to the body in that it's in space and it's physical, and the animating essence of it is the breath, the spirit, the psyche, because he's aligned semiology with psychology, and it's the animating breath, the animating interior spirit, soul, psyche that confers on the signifier its life. And without that, what you have simply is the pyramid. And so Hegel has this idea of the word, of the signifier, basically is analogous to the funerary monument, the pyramid, which becomes a sort of monument of death. And that associates, in Derrida's way of thinking, that begins to develop an association, and this will carry on into Saussure, of the signifier of writing, specifically in its written aspect, with death. Writing becomes deprivileged speech becomes privileged in Hegel in the following way. Hegel says that the process of Aufhebung, the process of sublation, takes place when the mind removes the sign from the exterior world and interiorizes it in consciousness. By embedding it within consciousness, by putting it into motion, as it were, through time, in thought, the sign is sublated. That is to say, it's lifted up out of the merely physical world, the spatial, physical, concrete world, and sublated into thought, and it becomes interiorized as time. And of course, time in this paradigm is privileged over space. Everything in Hegel flows through time. It's all about how the phenomenology of the spirit unfolds itself, the absolute unfolds itself through history and through time. And so time in Hegel is, of course, privileged over space. And the voice, though, unfolds, as Derrida points out in this essay, it's the voice that unfolds through time. The voice is linked with sound, sound occurs through time, music flows through time, and the voice flows through time. So this Aufhebung process, this sublation of the sign into the interiorization of the consciousness, putting it into the pit, as it were, of consciousness, leaving the pyramid outside, the dead signifier, the dead word divested of the living, animate presence of the soul, becomes for Hegel the essence of the Aufhebung, the sublation process, the putting into motion, the etherealization, basically, of the process of the production of signs. And so time, then, Derrida wants to demonstrate that time, then, in the metaphysical tradition, is privileged over space. Speech is privileged over writing. Speech then occurs in its immediacy in interior thought. It is closer to being. It's closer to the absolute, closer to spirit. So there's a kind of hierarchy, notice, in which thought is first. Thought is primary. It's in time, it's flowing, it's interiorized, and it's closer to being. It's closer to the spirit in this metaphysics of presence. The next thing removed from that is then speech. Speech is the exteriorization of the interior sign. The signs or the concepts, the Vorstellung, the representations, are exteriorized through speech. So it's speech that's privileged. And then the next thing after that is writing. Writing is simply the representation of a representation, since speech is a representation of thought. And so it's twice removed in this tradition of the metaphysics of presence from its origin, from the originary presence, the metaphysics of presence of the self-identical consciousness, the subject that Derrida is trying to attack here, or at least to dislocate through the play of différence, the play of significations here. And so that's the process that happens here. Now, it's interesting that in Derrida, it's a little bit counterintuitive. Derrida's association of the metaphysical tradition with the privileging of speech over writing seems to form a bit of an antinomy to anyone who has read McLuhan. Derrida didn't read McLuhan, and so there's a kind of media theoretical naivete about Derrida. A lot of what he does would be a sort of European equivalent of media studies. He's very much attentive to media of expression, mediology and mediatization. But the antinomy consists in the fact that for McLuhan, the history of the metaphysical age, which is basically what he calls the Gutenbergian galaxy, is text-dominated, and it begins with the printing press, and the printing press comes into being at the same time as the creation of Renaissance space, which is not an accident, according to McLuhan, because three-dimensional space is visual space. It is a space that indicates that the sense of sight has been stepped up, the other senses have been deprivileged, and this creates a uniform, empty, hollow container of space inside which objects are situated. And it's a linear way of thinking. It's modeled on the idea that with the printing press we have the macadamization of thought, the macadamization of reading, paving the way with this linearity of thinking that becomes paradigmatic. It becomes basically the model for the entirety of the metaphysical age, down to the 19th century. Derrida sees, as does Heidegger, the ending of the metaphysical age coming about around the time of Nietzsche, and it's at about that time that McLuhan, not by accident, perceives the Gutenbergian age coming to an end with the rise of electric technology, first with the telegraph that begins to configure a new acoustic sphere and begins to shift from the eye to the ear and from the written to the oral. Now, precisely what McLuhan is saying is a visual epoch, an epoch that privileges the text, in which the book becomes the paradigm over everything else, especially over the oral traditions. The metaphysical age, after all, is not an age of orality, it's an age of literacy. But Derrida goes back, interestingly enough, and he's very anxious, very concerned to portray that age as precisely an age, not necessarily of orality, but at least an age in which speech is privileged because it's closer to the metaphysics of being. It's closer to this subjective consciousness. And so he does characterize this age as an age in which speech is superior to writing, and writing, as Rousseau portrays it, as he goes to great pains in this essay to show that Hegel portrays it as a supplement. It's merely, Hegel just, he points out that Hegel gives just a couple of lines saying writing is not really worth talking about. We're not really going to worry about talking about it. It's twice removed. It's something else. Writing is not privileged in this tradition, and I think that the solution to the problem, this apparent antinomy between Derrida and McLuhan, is the fact that in Derrida, I think what's happening is that writing is beginning to appear as a problem precisely because the book is in trouble. In the time in which Derrida is writing, this is in the 1960s, this essay was written in 1968, writing is now beginning to be something that's under threat now. It's under attack from the electronic media that are beginning to surround it. We're getting, video cameras are coming in, computers are coming in, the television is coming in. Writing is becoming something that's beginning to disappear. And paradoxically, one only becomes conscious of an environment the moment that one is coming out of it, the moment that it begins to disappear. You can see the city, you're not aware of the city that you're in until you go drive up onto the hilltop and overlook like you're in Los Angeles, driving up on one of the hills. Then you can overlook and see the whole panoramic array of the city. Now you're out of it and you have a view above it and you can see what it looks like. So I think that the problem is that with Derrida, he's registering the fact that writing and the book are now a problem. It's beginning to disappear, and it's beginning to become something that he is consciously aware of. So he wants to go back through the metaphysical tradition to look for how speech was privileged in that tradition. And the reason why I think Hegel says, it doesn't say much about writing, or Rousseau doesn't think much of writing either, they're merely supplementary, is simply because when you're immersed in an environment of abundance, you simply take it for granted. You don't even notice that it's there. We don't pay any attention to the oxygen that we're immersed in precisely because we have such a great abundance of it. But the moment that you start to suffocate, the moment that the atmosphere starts to disappear, you become very concerned about its vanishing, and then it becomes apparent as a problem. So I think that the antinomy between Derrida and McLuhan can be, or at least start to be thought to be worked out somewhat along these lines of the disappearance of writing and Derrida registering the anxiety of the disappearance of writing. It is not an oral age. The metaphysical age is an age of literacy par excellence. It is not an oral age, despite the way Derrida portrays it as an age that privileges speech and the voice, because it's immediate. It has immediate authority and immediate self-presence over writing, which is regarded as something dead. Hegel associates it with the pyramid, the Egyptian pyramid, and it's something dead. It's something devoid of life. Derrida then does finish this essay by pointing out how Hegel, of the forms of writing that exist, Hegel of course privileges phonetic writing because it's alphabetic writing, and it's the closest to representing the voice within writing. It's more closely aligned with the voice, and how he disparages the writings of other traditions, especially the Egyptians and the Chinese, which are both variations of pictographic writing. And for Hegel, he disparages Egyptian writing because it's imagistic, and it's therefore not sublated, it's not etherealized, it's not more abstract. Everything in Hegel, the more abstract you get, the better you are, the more privileged the abstract thing becomes. And so for him, Egyptian hieroglyphics is deprivileged because it's too concrete, it's bestial, it's associated with animality, and he says that the getting rid of this with the Greeks is the image of Oedipus slaying the Sphinx, the man who overcomes the animal aspect, writing beginning to come in, which overcomes the tradition of the concrete, sensuous nature of Egyptian hieroglyphics. And then he talks about the interesting thing, though, about the Egyptians is that the entire Egyptian tradition is one, ironically, that's based on the power of the voice. The great Egyptian god Ptah in the Memphite theogony is the god who creates with the power of the word. He simply utters the word, and every word that he utters brings physical phenomena into being because because for the Egyptians the word was magically connected to the thing, and if you wanted to bring something into being, you had to pronounce the correct and proper spell.